The alleged Pentagon leaker has been arrested and captured, and we all are raising our eyebrows at this story. They tell us certain things are happening, and we all have our doubts. We know this is a big whopper of a story. The U.S. government has been in ultra panic mode, trying to figure out where these leaks are coming from, because it's making them look pretty bad. Or is it? We don't really know. As far as we can tell, it makes them look really bad, unless this was something they wanted to come out or something like that. Now, again, we don't know. Let's see what we can piece together here. Mr. Jack Teixeira continues to have the presumption of innocence, like all defendants in this country. But we've got some updates from the New York Times. They tell us federal officials are investigating the leaks, and Merrick Garland announced the arrest. Of course, we've already seen that. We'll get into that a little bit further. Here's the update. Here's what we know. Federal investigators on Thursday arrested a 21-year-old airman. The man is identified as Jack Teixeira, a member of the intelligence wing of the Massachusetts Air National Guard, tied to an online group where the leak first emerged. He followed his family into the military, guided a group of young men, and you start to see this. They bonded over guns and racist memes and video games and international politics. You start to wonder if all of this was brewing on a Discord application. Maybe we need something like the Restrict Act to come in here and make sure this is all safe for us, so that these mostly young men aren't being racist with memes. The far right is trying to paint Teixeira, wow, this is new, in a favorable light as an anti-war whistleblower, even though he posted the classified documents in a small private Discord server and never sought to publicize them in a meaningful way. Just one example is Marjorie Taylor Greene is saying he's a white male Christian anti-war that makes him an enemy for the Biden regime. Love this. So it's getting politicized already. Okay, perfect. We can do it. Now, we'll just keep going. The FBI converged on a quiet street in Massachusetts before the arrest. And this is very curious. You know, the narrative is already percolating because it feels like the New York Times was, and the Washington Post, they were both on the story before the feds were. And we were asking ourselves, why are the people in these groups talking with the media? Maybe because they think the media is a friendly entity that is going to protect their identity, you know, protect their sources and methods and all of those things. You give them whistleblower protection. You don't out them. But the New York Times and the Washington Post, as soon as they publish their stories, U.S. government officials are there arresting this dude immediately. It's very interesting. It's very convenient. It's almost like it was a simultaneous apprehension with the media and the government working in cahoots. Doesn't usually work that way. The FBI converged on a quiet street in Massachusetts before the arrest. They tell us a little bit more about him. Among the many questions regarding him, 21 years old, Airman First Class, accused of illegally sharing classified defense info. He was trained as a cyber transport systems journeyman and was decorated with an Air Force Achievement Medal, who's awarded to junior officers for notable achievements. Career website says cyber transport systems specialists are responsible for keeping the Air Force's communication networks running. So the question then becomes, is he skimming something off the top, right? If he's monitoring communication systems, is he gleaning off a packet or two as it comes across? The job requires applicants to complete what the military calls a single scope background investigation. Assigned to the 102nd Intelligence Wing, a little bit more about him. Publicly lists several job openings for cryptologic and geospatial intelligence. Now, he's going to be arraigned. He's been arrested, charged with various crimes. We'll see what those are. Arraigned tomorrow in Boston. So we'll get those documents. I imagine the documents are all skidding into the courts. Paul was a neighbor who was on Maple Street. He watched from his yard as he was arrested. Now, there's police checkpoints at the site. And I wanted to show I wanted to zoom back and just scroll through this timeline so we could see how they piece this together. Here's a trail of the digital evidence that led to his arrest. These are some of the photographs that he was sharing, and you see the color of the granite countertop upon which the photos were being taken. They're saying they match. Oh, we can identify the patterns. Gaming friends were all a part of the group. They knew who it was. Here's what they posted this morning. The leader of a small online gaming chat where a trove of this material is a 21-year-old member of the National Guardsmen. His name is Jack Teixeira. Oversaw a private online group called Thug Shaker Central, where 20 to 30 people were in there. Federal investigators had been searching for days. The Times spoke with 4 members of the group. And it's weird. As soon as the Times and as soon as the Washington Post talked to the people who were in the group, maybe like they reached out to him, hey, we're just journalists, we're going to protect you, we're going to protect your sources. You turn around, boom, the FBI shows up at the dude's house. While the gaming friends would not identify the group's leader by name, a trail of digital evidence compiled by the Times led to Airman Teixeira. Okay? So the New York Times got it. They got it. They outed this guy. His friends contacted the New York Times. The Times spoke with 4 members, one of whom had known him for years, met in person, referred to him as OG. The friend described him as older. They were their teens. While they would not identify the group's leader by name, they want to protect him, right? The Times is coming to these people and saying, no, this is a safe space. We just want information. Tell us what's going on. We're not going to get anything out of you. We'll protect your identity. Now, they're there. They give them some information. The Times, which is essentially at this point an extension of the federal government. And if you want to dig into that a little bit further, read a book called The Gray Lady Winked. All about 10 times the New York Times has made historic lies and whoppers and who they're funded by. It's basically a propaganda entity. We cover it to see what they're showing us so we can lampoon it and make a mockery of it. So they said, we're not going to identify the group's leader by name. But then they compiled a trail of evidence that led to Airman Teixeira, right? The U.S. government can't go do all of those things and can't compel people to come out of the woodwork and talk to a friendly media. They can't say, hey, we're just innocent. We're just going to publish your story. No, they go, oh, from the FBI, sorry. So the Times does what the U.S. government cannot do and then does their own investigation and hands it off to the government. This same pattern is pretty disgusting. We're seeing a lot of this. Things the government cannot do, they outsource it. They can't censor your speech, no problem. They'll just put pressure on Twitter and the other social media companies. And the list goes on and on. So they got to be very careful talking to the media. I guess the media is part of the government as far as we can tell. The Times has been able to link Teixeira to other members and also match details on the margins around some of the photos. There he is. The Times also established through social media posts and military records that he was part of the National Air National Guard, right? This was all before he was ultimately arrested. There's a full-blown investigation going on. Officials within the U.S. government, they posted the story, boom, the government arrests him. So it is a strange feeling when either the Times is more investigatory and more capable in their investigations than the U.S. government. Or maybe this is just teamwork. They're helping each other get this done. Because the U.S. government couldn't have done it on their own. They just send one. And so there will be more, obviously, to come on this. But let's see what else is there. CNN had some of the footage as Mr. Teixeira was being arrested, and you can see
investigation. But the identity of this person was made public by some of the news media reports in the New York Times, and of course
they
the Washington
beat the
Post,
government.
which has been doing a lot of reporting on this over the last few days, reported on his identity. So I'm told by sources that the investigation kind of accelerated as a result of his identity becoming public. So now we expect that he's going to be taken to a federal court there in Massachusetts. In Boston.
Yeah, it became accelerated when the government realized that everybody else knew who it was and they didn't. They're like, oh, all these FBI agents are like sitting around with their crayons and they're drawing books and they're like drawing circles and maps and things. And maybe he's over here, and they put their maps on the board with their yarn. And then CNN's like, New York Times is like, oh, we got the guys right over here. And like, oh, perfect. And they run over there. So yeah, it accelerated.
Boston, where the procedure will begin to remove him and bring him down to the Washington, D.C. area, where we expect that the charges are going to be filed for his connection to the leaking of these documents. At this point, there's not a lot we know about the exact charges. We expect we might hear more from the Attorney General and from the Justice Department soon, whenever they decide to make public the charges that are to be announced. But we do know, obviously, that they, as you could hear from that briefing just now at the Pentagon, they're treating this as a criminal matter. They believe that there's some serious national security damage that has been done by the exposure of these documents. The Washington Post said that there was as many as 500 documents that they had seen on various platforms, including on these chat rooms.
So we have to ask ourselves whether the U.S. government knew about this, whether the New York Times was able to crack this. Was the federal government interviewing these same people? You got to imagine they had all of the records from Discord, so they had already been out to residences. But the New York Times also had the list too, and they didn't get IP addresses and other details that would have been disclosed from Discord, the company where these people were chatting. So it's very curious about how everybody came to the same conclusion at the same time, which in this case is this guy. And we've seen this game played here, my friends. This is not unusual stuff, right? When we talked about Michael Sussman and the FBI, there were all sorts of stories being planted. And Michael Sussman was the one trying to sell one of those called the Steele dossier. Take it to the FBI, plant a story, take it to the media so that they reach the same conclusion at the same time. It's a literal op that they do. Tell the media something, tell the FBI something, play them both against each other. I'm not saying that happened here. I'm just saying there's a historical precedent for this. And I don't know whether this is as simple as that. This is some kid in a chat room disclosing some of the country's most sensitive documents, and that's it. Feels like a very neat way to just wrap this whole thing up, put a little bow on it. Oh, it's just a Discord server, a bunch of high school kids, right-wingers out there, and guns, and American patriots out there. And we've already seen here entire new entities being maligned: homegrown domestic violent extremism, domestic racially motivated violent extremism. They're psychopaths who just come up with all sorts of designations for any reason. And anytime there is a mechanism by which they can exploit one of those groups for their own political gain, they'll do it. We've seen the Restrict Act being talked about. We've seen new efforts to bring a new Patriot Act down upon the internet. And all of the Twitter files are unveiling that there are bureaucrats salivating at the opportunity to censor more people. And if Discord and this hack leak operation or whatever this is going to capture the attention of Congress, and maybe they need to do something about it. That's where I start to get concerned, and I get very skeptical about anything they tell us because they've got a very long history of lying.
Discord, which is a gaming platform. And so that's, of course, now in the hands of the Justice Department and prosecutors who are going to be bringing the federal charges against this young man. Again, 21-year-old Jack Teixeira, 21 years old, member of the Massachusetts Air National Guard. Again, those are pictures, we believe, of Teixeira being taken into custody by the FBI and by the investigators there who've been working this case frantically over the last few days.
Yeah, but they didn't find him. Or maybe they did. Seems like maybe the New York Times found him. We're going to have to wait and see what some of the filings look like. But Merrick Garland and Brigadier General Patrick Ryder both made announcements today. Brigadier General was first. This is Patrick Ryder.
I think it's important to remember that DOD's intelligence activities are primarily focused internationally. So to the extent that the department collects any information related to U.S. persons, for example, or gaming chat rooms, it would have to be conducted in accordance with law and policy and in a manner that protects privacy and civil liberties. We are taking and have taken steps to review distribution lists and to ensure that the folks receiving information have a need to know. But again...
Yeah, and I think that comes back. There's some hints that maybe the leaks were because of people being copied on emails. Literally, it was just an inadvertent copy kind of a situation. Somebody was being sent highly sensitive material. It was being forwarded along. It was being passed on to somebody, and it ended up in his inbox. He goes, wow, this is crazy. He didn't do anything necessarily volitional to go get it. It was just an inadvertent accidental disclosure. The question to Brigadier was, have you ever, are you going to modify those distribution lists? He says, yeah, obviously.
To belabor the point, we have safeguards in place. We have processes. We have procedures. We'll continue to do due diligence as part of this review to ensure that we're doing everything we can to prevent potential unauthorized disclosures in the future, recognizing that, again, this was a criminal deliberate act.
Criminal deliberate act, which means, I'm guessing since the FBI has conducted the arrest, sounds like he's being prosecuted out of Boston. So Boston, out of a criminal court in Boston, out of a civilian criminal court. Now, Attorney General Merrick Garland also made a very brief announcement today about the arrest.
Today, the Justice Department arrested Jack Douglas Teixeira in connection with an investigation into alleged unauthorized removal, retention, and transmission of classified national defense information. Teixeira is an employee of the United States Air Force National Guard. FBI agents took Teixeira into custody earlier this afternoon without incident. He will have an initial appearance at the U.S. District Court for the District of Massachusetts. I want to thank the FBI, Justice Department prosecutors, and our colleagues at the Department of Defense for their diligent work on this case. This investigation is ongoing. We will share more information at the appropriate time.
Bro, you should have thanked the New York Times. I'm pretty sure they're the one who found him. I'm not sure you guys did much of anything. They were writing about it before you guys were even on scene. And if you want more about that, here is another link. Now, they showed up with all of the FBI agents in full gear and camo in case this guy happened to be an insurrectionist, I guess. In case he was, maybe going to go after a podium or something. But they got him in handcuffs. He was not really putting up a fight at all. WCVB from Boston, they had an interesting article here, and they wrote the following. And I like local news. Sometimes they are more accurate. But this was interesting. From Needham, Massachusetts, armed FBI agents swarmed the home and arrested him where he was connected with linking documents. Now, Sky 5 was overhead on Thursday when armed agents approached the 21-year-old through the woods and an armored vehicle drove up the driveway. Moments later, a man in a green shirt and red basketball shorts exited the home, put his hands on his head, turned around, walked back to the team. We saw that on CNN. He's like, hey, what's up, guys? Guess this is it. Now, this was interesting. Earlier, while law enforcement officials were gathering nearby, Sky 5 was already on the scene and saw the same man sitting on a porch reading a book, just waiting for the feds to show up. He's just reading. Probably philosophy or something very intelligent. Curious what that book is. Investigators believe that Teixeira, who specializes in intelligence, led the chat group. Here's some more of the footage. That's the armored vehicle that was pulling up on scene. This is the footage from their camera. You can see they're walking him out there. Big group of people. Shut down the whole road. Zooming in. Thinking he could be a Russian asset. Here he is coming out of the house now. So I wanted to see if they had him reading the book, but maybe not. Reading the book on the porch. So this is, we're going to see Teixeira. There is the armored vehicle in the front. Here he is walking with his hands out. American flag there. You see that right on his house. Turning around, following instructions, backing up slowly, and he is in their custody. Good. All the cameras are there. Not too aggressive. All right. Well done, FBI agents. Great job. All right, so that is the latest on Teixeira. Now, there's a little bit more. When they were there, we saw some of the footage that there was a lot of helicopters there. This is what the scene looked like. This came over from Lord Bebo, who's a good follow on Twitter, by the way. Says, helicopters over the house of the alleged leaker. Somebody called Greta. A lot of CO2 up there, just floating around. You can see they were there for a while. Maybe he knew. Maybe that's why he was reading the book. He said, all right, here we go. This Twitter user, Michael Horowitz, dug this up and said that he's pretty well credentialed. We saw some of this floating around. Here is the 102 Intelligence Wing congratulating him just last July. He was promoted to Airman First Class, and you see this came out. Congratulations to some of the 102nd Intelligence Wing's most recent promotees. And right there, Airman First Class, Jack Teixeira. It's a very interesting situation that's happening right now. We don't know exactly what the story is or what the official charges will be. We'll continue to cover it as soon as we see the indictment or the complaint, the statement of facts, whatever it is they end up doing. He's going to be arraigned tomorrow in Boston. We'll cover that. But my question, of course, is always about the legitimacy of all charges brought by the U.S. government, and then often asking the secondary question, which is, what is this really all about? Is this a giant distraction? I mean, or is this the story as it is? Is this just everything they said it is? Which is some weird thing that happened, and it's all simply resolved? We'll see. We'll continue to cover it. Thank you for subscribing and following along wherever it is you're watching this, and we'll look forward to seeing you as we carry on with that case.